Hey, I'm Nick Kalikas. Welcome to the show where you get first look at the latest odds before they hit the sports books.
And I'm Miguel Iturrate.
This is the place for a unique look at MMA from a gambler's perspective.
And this is MMA Oddsbreaker. Welcome to the show. Nick Kalikas alongside Miguel Iturrate.
On today's show, we're going to get things started by looking at UFC 155. December 29th is right around the corner. The card features JDS defending his heavyweight title against Cain Velasquez, a little rematch there. We're also going to look at where the odds are for some of the main card fights.
That's right, and on today's Oddsbreaker segment, I'll be joined by Adam Martin and Nick Vlass. Both guys will help me break 4 odds that have not hit the sports books yet.
Let's get started by jumping right into UFC 155, the UFC's last show of 2012. Nick, what do you think?
I think it should be a great card. I mean, a lot of changes to the card have taken place, so it's not as dynamic as the original card was set to be, but it's still a decent card. Starting off with the main event, JDS versus Cain Velasquez. We're going to read some of the odds right now from our sponsor, sportsbook, betdsi.eu. The main card is out there, just recently actually released, so some of the lines that you're seeing are openers here, but JDS has been out for a while, that line. It's minus 165 plus 135. Opened a little bit lower, public betting JDS slightly more. Give me your quick thoughts on that fight.
I think it's a close fight. I think I like the odds. I may go with JDS if I had to actually pick somebody. I'm probably going to stay away from it. But the bottom line is I think this fight, in its tension and dynamic of both fighters, I think we're looking at another 2-3 minute fight, no more than that. I don't think we see this fight get into the 4th round.
You know, I was all over JDS the first match. I mean, especially as a slight underdog, I really love that price. So I hopped on it. This fight, I'm not so sure because Cain Velasquez is one of those fighters. Obviously, we know what he brings to the table with his wrestling, with his just grinding style, with his toughness, with his explosiveness on the feet. I mean, he's a decent striker. His wrestling credentials speak for themselves. But the way he matches up with JDS is why I selected him the first time and why I'm going to have to go with him again. Now, as far as the bet goes, I'm not too keen on laying 165 on a fight like that because you can't underestimate Cain Velasquez. He's going to come in more prepared for this fight. He knows what he's up against, I think even more so now, obviously, with JDS. So he's going to have a good game plan, and it's not out of the question that he wins this fight. Now, as far as line movement goes, I would keep a close eye because I do think eventually we'll get some big Cain Velasquez action. So if the line does creep up to JDS towards 2-1, I think we'll see a huge droppage, maybe on fight day. But it's a tough fight to bet. Again, I'm leaning towards JDS slightly for this one. Okay, moving on to the co-main event, which should be the co-main event at least, Jim Miller versus Joe Lauzon. Now, an interesting fight because both these guys have been around in the lightweight division, kind of up towards the top tier of fighters in the lightweight division for a while. Jim Miller was so close to a title shot there, but unfortunately he did have the loss to Nate Diaz. And Joe Lauzon was climbing his ladder as well, like I said, and he was so close to a title shot. Now these guys are fighting each other, and they match up pretty well. The current line, minus 225 for Jim Miller, come back around plus 175 for Joe Lauzon. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a nice even fight, and I think both guys have pretty similar skill packages. They're pretty tricky on the ground. What I like about Jim Miller is he seems to have a little bit more gas. Lauzon seems to lose his tank a little bit towards the end of fights, and I think that might make a difference here if it goes fast. If it's over in the first couple of minutes, it could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, both of these guys are definitely dangerous, especially their submission games are very dangerous, as you could tell by the resumes here. I think Lauzon has a better striking overall a little bit. He can be more effective on the feet, but Jim Miller should be the better grinder. So that's why you're seeing Jim Miller is around a 2-1 favorite. I wouldn't touch the juice again on this because based on his recent performances, I haven't been that impressed with Jim Miller. I think he's actually kind of on a decline a little bit, where Joe Lauzon's probably, again, maybe improving slightly, little by little. Both these guys are almost the same fighters there were a few years ago, just maybe slight improvements. But like I said, I think Jim Miller might be slightly on the decline. So if I was going to bet this fight, I'd probably bet the dog on Joe Lauzon or pass. So it's dog or pass. I would not lay the juice. But I am going to pick Jim Miller as far as my pick goes to win a tight decision probably here. Let's move on to the next one. It's Tim Boesch versus Costa Philippou. And man, what an interesting fight. Again, Philippou steps in for Chris Weidman in this fight, so a little bit short notice, but he was getting prepared recently for Nick Ring. As we all know, that fight didn't take place. So Philippou should be in decent shape coming into this fight. I opened at minus 130, come back even money. The betting public at some other spots I've noticed have been betting Philippou a little bit more. What are your thoughts?
I like the dynamic of the teammate replacing his injured teammate, you know, kind of like stand up for the school kind of thing. I think that's kind of cool. And I give Philippou a lot of credit. I can't believe he's the favorite in this fight. I think Boesch is, you know, though Boch has an incomplete game, I see him as being able to grind him and take him down and control the fight, and I think Costa has to fight it standing up.
I don't know if he's going to be able to get that takedown. That's why. And on the feet, I think that you're going to see the movement of Philippou be a little bit tricky for Boch, and he's going to be able to land more. Now, the inactivity of Philippou scares me a little bit, and you're right. Boch is a tough guy. He's going to probably, if he was smart, he's going to look to clinch up against the cage, maybe look for some takedowns and get Philippou down and control that way, and just bring a tough, hard fight. This is not an easy fight for either guy. I mean, so Pick'em is probably pretty accurate line. That's where it's close to now. And we could see Boch actually flip to a slight favorite, as you mentioned as well. But I think overall, the betting public, or maybe the sharper side, might be on Constance Philippou here, because I do think his angles and his footwork with his striking is going to be the key here. I think he's going to land more effective strikes, on Tim Boch, and he's going to probably win a close decision, if not even a stoppage. Boch is a hard guy to stop, but I do think if Philippou lands enough, we might see a stoppage as well. Let's move on to another interesting clash at middleweight between Bettor and Okami. Now, we did break this line a while back on the show. Okami is down to about minus 140, minus 135, so he's creeping down to almost a pick'em now. He is the favorite coming into this fight. I'm kind of going back and forth on this fight. Let me get your quick thoughts.
You know, I'm a Bettor fan in this particular fight, and I'm not an Okami fan. You know, when Dana White makes one of his incredible, outrageous comments like, this is the best fighter I ever had in Japan, it really shows the guy just likes to hear himself talk, you know what I mean? Because this guy has been regressing. He's got a game, like people say he's very strong in the clinch and stuff like that, and sometimes he takes, you know, entire fights off and doesn't use his physical strength, you know what I mean? And I see Bettor as being able to take him out on the ground, similar to the way he did with Polaris. Get him down and just beat him up.
I'm going to actually disagree with you a little bit. Now, I'm not confident in Okami because his chin, and like you said, he is declining a little bit here. But I do respect, by the way, that run that he did go on when he was earning his title shot. I think Okami was definitely one of the best 185ers in the world for a long time. So on that end, I do see where he deserved the title shot against Anderson Silva. It didn't go too well for him, but since that time, we've seen a different Okami. I mean, he's just not the same. He is on the decline. His chin seems to be getting worse. And with a fighter like Bettor's going to test that chin. He's going to get him to the ground. I think, if anything, if the fight hits the floor, Okami's going to be on top. And that's going to be Okami's key to win this fight, controlling Ellenberger, again, against the cage, get him down on the ground. And if he does that, he's going to win the decision. Now, he won a close decision against Bettor before. I think since that time, more improvement actually came from Okami. But like I said, I can't trust that decline he is on, and his chin is so suspect. It's a pass fight for me. I'm almost tempted to bet Okami because I think he might have a little bit left, and all of us are probably underestimating him, and he is the better fighter. I mean, I think, if anything, Bettor's a very dangerous striker. He's well-rounded. He's got a submission game as well, but I think he's a little bit overrated, honestly, and he's just not quite there. This might be a good time he's catching Okami, but we'll have to see. So my pick is going to be Okami to probably win a close decision, but we'll see how it goes. And Chris Lieben and Carlos Vimola. Now, I opened the line minus 200 for Chris Lieben. Some people think it's low. Other places out there actually had Lieben under 2-1 favorite at a time or two. So we'll see which way the line continues to move here. I think 2-1 Lieben's about right. A lot of people are thinking it's low. What are your thoughts on this one?
I wouldn't touch this fight with a 10-foot pole, honestly. Just the bottom line is Lieben's coming in, returning from a suspension, and I want to take a look first. I want to take a look. I know the UFC would probably want him to win his first fight, his return fight. I know, you know, at times with all the injuries, and they've had a bad year with injuries and stuff, you take a guy like Lieben who's known to the public, and a guy that, you know, they've main evented with him in times, and they're very happy probably to have him back on the roster. So I think that they've probably given him a fight here that he should win, but I can't really bet him until I see him one time after that long suspension, especially for what he was suspended for, which, you know, I think was something like painkillers or something like that, and just to see how his mindset adjusts.
Yeah, and you know what? My initial thoughts to this fight when I first heard it released and when I looked at it was Lieben's going to be a decent favorite. But then when you start digging into this fight a lot closer, I think Vimola's actually going to hang in there with him. He's a tough dude. He's hard to stop. He's hard to finish. And Lieben doesn't have, he's got good submissions, but he doesn't have the submission game to really threaten that much. When it comes to the way he matches up with Vimola. On the feet, obviously, you should give the edge to Chris Lieben. But again, Vimola's a tough dude, and you never know. The problem with Chris Lieben is he's so inconsistent. You just don't know which version is going to show up, like you kind of mentioned as well. So coming off that suspension, coming off all the history that we've seen Chris Lieben, it's hard to lay the juice on the guy, but he should ultimately win this fight. Now, this is another situation here where I'd probably bet the dog or pass. So it's not a very smart idea, I think, to put Chris Lieben maybe even in a parlay, because we're just not sure how he's going to show up here. Time to get rolling on today's Oddsbreaker segment. Let me introduce both of our guests. First, returning to the show, a very talented MMA journalist.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Also making his return to the Oddsbreaker show is a professional gambler, Nick Vlass. Nick, welcome back.
Pleasure being back.
Now, both of you guys are very familiar with how the show works. Let me quickly explain. BetDSI.eu, our sponsored sportsbook, has donated a $5K bankroll to both guys. Now, they get to select from 4 fights that I picked today and bet $500 either on the favorite or the underdog. We're going to get started first with UFC 156, a huge fight, a heavyweight battle between Alistair Overeem and Antonio Silva. We're going to get rolling with Adam here on the first fight. Antonio Silva versus Alistair Overeem. Adam, I'm opening up Overeem minus 315, the comeback on Silva plus 235. Give me your take, give me your bet.
I'm going to go with Alistair Overeem in the fight. I think he's an elite striker, and my biggest problem with Bigfoot Silva is, while he is a talented fighter, his chin is very questionable. We saw Daniel Cormier knock him out. Saw Cain Velasquez pound him out. We saw Mike Kyle knock him down. So I think that Overeem's going to land on him and knock him out. Bigfoot obviously does have power too, and Overeem's chin is questionable as well. But I think with the long layoff that Overeem's had because of the drug suspension, I think he's going to be very motivated to come back, get a big knockout, and cement his place as the #1 contender. So my money's on Alistair Overeem.
Okay, so Adam Martin's going to go with the favorite here, $15.75 to win $500 at minus 315 on Alistair Overeem. Let's throw it over to Nick Vlass. Nick, what do you think about this fight, Overeem versus Silva?
Well, Overeem definitely has the power to KO Bigfoot. But my problem with Overeem is the year layoff and the PEDs. You don't know how he's going to come back, and I just can't lay the minus 315. So I'm going with Silva's value play.
Okay, short but to the point, and you are going to roll with the underdog, 500 to win, 1175 on Antonio Silva to get the win here. And let me just point this out. You did pick Brown over Silva during that fight recently as well, and Silva did come through with the underdog. So both of our guests do split on this fight. One goes with Silva, one goes with the favorite Overeem. We'll see how it plays out at UFC 156. Okay, let's move on to the next fight from today's Oddsbreaker segment. A huge fight, the headliner from UFC Fuel TV 8, a battle between Wanderlei Silva and Brian Stann. Now, this fight is going to take place at 205 instead of 185. We're going to start off with Nick Vlass first here. Nick, I'm going to open up Brian Stann minus 175. The comeback on Wanderlei Silva is going to be plus 145. Give me your take, give me your bet.
Well, this is an interesting fight because they do have a common opponent, Michael Bisping. And Brian Stann lost to Bisping, and Wanderlei Silva beat Bisping. So I don't know what you can take from that, but it was at different points in time. The bottom line about this fight is Brian Stann has superior KO power, and Silva has the suspect's chin. He's on the regression. He's 36 years old. I know he's fighting in Japan, and he's used to it, but I'm going to go with the KO power of Brian Stann at minus 175.
Okay, Brian Stann is the play for Nick Vlass. It's going to be minus 175, as he just mentioned, $875 to win $500. Now let's throw it over to Adam Martin. Adam, what do you think about Brian Stann versus Wanderlei Silva?
Yeah, not only do they have a common opponent in Michael Bisping, they also have a common opponent in Chris Lieben. Chris Lieben knocked out Wanderlei Silva in under 30 seconds, while Brian Stann knocked out Chris Lieben. Again, I'm not sure what you can take from that, but I mean, we all know that Wanderlei Silva is on the decline, his chin is fading, and Brian Stann hits very, very hard. So at minus 175, I am all over Brian Stann in this fight. He will knock out Wanderlei Silva, and I think this will probably be Wanderlei Silva's last fight in MMA.
Okay, so Adam Martin also going to lay the juice on the favorite here, minus 175, $875 to win $500 on Brian Stann over Wanderlei Silva. So both of our experts do agree that at UFC Fuel TV 8, in the headlining bout, Brian Stann defeats Wanderlei Silva. Okay, moving on to the next fight here. We're going to stick with UFC Fuel TV 8, another huge fight from that card. It's going to be about between Stefan Struve and Mark Hunt. Now, a heavyweight battle that everybody's really anticipating here. We're going to start off with Adam first here. Adam, I'm going to open up Stefan Struve as a slight favorite, minus 165. The comeback's going to be plus 135 on Mark Hunt. Give me your take and give me your bet.
Yeah, really interesting fight. Mark Hunt is the shortest heavyweight in the UFC. He's 5'10". Stefan Struve's the tallest guy. He's 7 feet. So really interesting matchup in that sense. But I'm going to go with Mark Hunt in this fight. And the thing is, I think that Stefan Struve's best way to victory is to take Hunt down, because we all know that Mark Hunt has an iron chin, and Stefan Struve is not going to knock him out. I don't see Stefan Struve being able to take Mark Hunt down. Maybe he could pull guard, but I just don't see it. I think Hunt's going to be able to keep the fight standing. And I think he's going to land one of those bombs that we all know he has in his hands. So I see Mark Hunt knocking out Stefan Struve and moving one place closer to a title shot. I never thought I'd say this a couple years ago. Mark Hunt is really looking good right now. So, there are some question marks about him with his long injury layoff, but I think it's a good style matchup for him. So I'm going to go with Mark Hunt, the underdog here.
Okay, so Adam Martin is going to take the dog money here. It's plus 135, so 500 to win, 675 on Mark Hunt over Stefan Struve. Let's throw it over to Nick Vlass. Vlass, what do you think about this fight?
Well, I slightly prefer Hunt in here for the fact that he fights well in Japan. He KO'd Congo. and it's a good style matchup for him. Struve has a suspect chin, and if Hunt can land one of his bombs, he'll knock him out. It's a close fight, but I prefer a Hunt if it stays standing.
So Nick Vlass also finds value in Mark Hunt at plus 135. It's going to be 500 to win 675. So both of our experts agree that Mark Hunt has an excellent shot at upsetting Stefan Struve at UFC TV Fuel 8. All right, time for today's bonus fight on the Oddsbreaker segment. A huge fight with title implications on the line at welterweight between Johny Hendricks and Jake Ellenberger. Now, Hendricks recently got slated for the title shot. Everybody's really expecting him to come out hungry in this fight. That being said, we're going to start off with Nick Vlass first in this fight. Nick, I am going to open up Hendricks as a decent favorite, minus 170. The comeback on Ellenberger is going to be plus 140. Give me your take. Give me your bet.
Okay, the Hendricks-Ellenberger fight, I think, is going to be a stand-up affair. If it goes past the first round, I think Hendricks has a big edge. Ellenberger has shown a tendency to fade. With his fight with Campman, I mean, he was dominating the fight in the first round, and in the second round, he just faded and got KO'd. So for that reason, I gotta take Hendricks. He's got superior cardio and stamina, and he can go the full 3 rounds. So I'm willing to lay the minus 175 on Hendricks.
Okay, so Vlass is going to lay the juice on Johny Hendricks here at minus 170, not 175, so 5 cents cheaper, but basically the same line here. And it's going to be $850 to win $500. Now let's throw it over to Adam Martin. Adam, what do you think about Hendricks versus Ellenberger?
Yeah, I agree with Nick that in the first round, it's probably a coin flip. I mean, both guys have tremendous knockout power, but I think Johny Hendricks is the more complete martial artist. We've seen that he can go 3 rounds. We've seen that, he can lay guys out with 1 punch. And in Jake Ellenberger's last fight, the knee that Martin Campman hit him with, I mean, I wasn't in the cage, but it didn't seem like it was all that hard. I'm sure the fading had something to do with it. So I actually think Jake Ellenberger has a bit of a questionable chin. I think this is a great matchup for Johny Hendricks because he can keep the fight on the feet or he can take it to the ground if he wants. I think he'll probably knock Ellenberger out, and I think he'll probably get his title shot after. So at minus 170, I love Johny Hendricks in this fight.
Adam Martin also agrees with Nick Vlass. He's going to lay the juice at minus 170. Again, it's going to be $850 to win $500 on Johny Hendricks. So both of our experts do agree and select Johny Hendricks to beat Jake Ellenberger at UFC 158. Make sure you stay tuned to see what Miguel and I have to say during our odds adjustment segment. Okay, guys, well done on today's Oddsbreaker segment. You helped me break 4 big fights. Before we let you go, I do want to take the time and give you a second to plug your websites or anything you got going on. Let's start off with Adam first.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and Miguel, for letting me on the show again. It's always fun to be on. Yeah, and check me out on Twitter at MMAdammartin, and you can check out the MMA Oddscast next week for the UFC 155 betting lines and stuff like that. So thanks a lot again.
All right, Nick Vlass, what about you?
It's always a pleasure to be on the show. You can check me out on Nick_Vlass on Twitter, and that's about it. Thanks.
All right, guys, excellent job, and we'll see you back on down the road.
Welcome back to the show. Coming out of another great Oddsbreaker segment, Adam Martin, Nick Vlass, making their picks on these fights. Nick is going to have to adjust the odds. Nick, why don't you tell the people what this process is all about?
Now, typically when you do see a fresh line hit the sportsbook, you'll notice a movement early on. That's because they're adjusting line when a max bet or 2 does come in. So we're going to take that same principle, same philosophy, and put it into play during our odds adjustment segment. Starting off with the first fight, it was Antonio Silva versus Alistair Overeem. Now, I opened Alistair Overeem minus 315, the comeback on Silva at plus 235. Both of our guests split. Vlass came in on Silva, and Adam Martin came in on Alistair Overeem. Give me your quick thoughts here.
One of the recurring themes when I give advice for fights is, at times, wait for the weigh-ins. You got to see what the fighters look like when they're cutting weight, when they're changing weight classes, when they're coming off suspensions. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, it may not be politically correct, but I'm going to say it. Alistair Overeem is a PED abuser, I believe. It's just my theory. I don't think it was just a random test that he got caught a little bit. I think he relied on it to use it throughout his fight career. And I really got to take a look at him and see how he comes in. Silva is a doorman. He is a very tough fighter who loses to the top guys. If Alistair remains a top guy, then he will win the fight. But I got to see him. I can't lay the money out right now.
Yeah, I agree, man, and I think you pretty much said it all. You said it straightforward, too, so I'm sure there's going to be some mini controversy with some of those comments. But you're right, a lot of people do believe that Overeem's been on PEDs for a long time, not just this time that he finally got nailed for it. But we'll see. I mean, Overeem's definitely a talented fighter. The guys did split. I'm not going to adjust the line. It's going to stay the same. It's going to open up with Overeem as a 3-to-1 favorite, 315-ish at the sports books when it does hit the books. And it is a hard fight to bet because, man, we've counted Antonio Silva, me personally, out as well so many times, and the guy just continues to come through on most occasions. So it is going to be a difficult fight. Both of these guys have suspect chins, as I believe Adam pointed out as well. So you never know. The first person with this much power that does connect could be lights out, but that probably is going to be Overeem knocking out Silva. I mean, I mentioned it before, that big, huge target of Silva has on his shoulders with his head. I think Overeem can catch it. Let's move on to the next fight. Headlining fight from UFC Fuel TV 8. An awesome fight now at light heavyweight between Brian Stann and Wanderlei Silva. I opened up Brian Stann at -175. The comeback on Wanderlei Silva +145. Both of our experts, Vlass and Martin, came in on Brian Stann. They're thinking he's going to get the knockout. Now, I think the majority of the public is probably going to agree with them a little bit. We're going to adjust the line. The line when it hit the sports books is now going to be -205. The comeback +155 on Wanderlei. Let me get Miguel's quick thoughts.
I'm a huge Wanderlei Silva fan. I love this guy, and I've loved him, you know, now for almost 15 years in this sport. And that's the bugaboo here, you know? I mean, it looks like he really wants to end his career the same way Chuck Liddell did. And that's kind of sad. I hate watching it, and I think Stann is the right guy to beat him up again.
He should be. You know, I mean, again, Wanderlei Silva is another guy that we constantly count out. I mean, I think his chin is definitely on the decline, but he manages to hang in there 5 tough rounds against Rich Franklin. So he has those fights. And against Bisping as well, I thought that fight would end in a knockout either way and ended up going the distance. So if Wanderlei Silva's chin does hold in there, he's got a great shot to win this fight. Obviously, with his aggression on the feet as well, he can knock out Brian Stann. I'm just not really comfortable laying the juice. I do agree with all of you guys. I think the Stann should knock out Wanderlei Silva. But in Japan, at 205, there's a lot kind of going more for Wanderlei Silva in this fight than there is Stann. So I'm just going to back away and not even take this fight. If the line does get crazy by fight time and there's more value on Wanderlei Silva, then it might be a bet worth taking on Wanderlei as well. But I really don't want to put my money on Wanderlei at this point in his career either. Okay, let's move on to the next fight, a heavyweight battle from UFC Fuel TV 8 as well. It's Stefan Struve versus Mark Hunt. Now, I opened Struve, the slight favorite, -165. A lot of people aren't going to be shocked by that. Comeback +135. But our two experts, Vlass and Martin, did come in on the dog money here with Mark Hunt. So I am going to have to adjust the line. I'm going to drop Struve to actually -150 now when it hits the sports books. The comeback on Mark Hunt's going to be +120. So they ate up a little bit of the dog value there. Give me your thoughts.
Now, the knock on Stefan Struve is that he doesn't have a chin, and he's been out ugly various times in his career, but he still is a young, fresh body. He's still coming up and rising, and he's fought really well. The other thing to notice is that he has been in there and extended a lot of bangers and taken some punches too as well. So I'm not quite sure I can chalk it up. A little 5'10" guy knocking out a 7-footer. Bottom line is Mark Hunt really isn't going to be able to work in training with a guy that is going to be exactly like Stefan or similar to Stefan in his physical dimensions. I think that gives Stefan a lot of outs in the fight. And I think Mark Hunt, say what you want to say about him, he's one of the toughest guys, incredible chin, huge puncher, but he's going to always be incomplete in his MMA game because his ground game will be limited, and I think Struve could use that. Struve's got more outs.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. It's a tough fight. I'm going back and forth on this fight as well, but I see your points here. Struve is definitely the more talented, the better overall fighter, but man, it's hard to argue that run, that nice little run Mark Hunt has. And you know what? As far as heavyweight striking goes, Hunt is probably at the top of the division when it comes to dangerous knockout power, period. And Struve's chin has been tested, like you said before. It seems like he's getting a little bit better. He's made some adjustments. He's always improving, but Mark Hunt does have that tremendous knockout power, man. This is another fight. I can't really lay the juice on Struve, even though he is the better fighter. I would almost have to side with that knockout power coming through as well and take some dog money. So right now, I don't blame the guys. I would probably take a stab at the dog money as well. Hopefully the public bets the line back up a little bit on Struve so we get a better price again. I mean, that might happen because Struve is getting a lot of respect, but it's a fight that you really can't count Struve out, but I think there is some value possibly at Mark Hunt on the dog as well. Let's move on to the last fight. From UFC 158, should be the co-main event, a welterweight clash between Johny Hendricks and Jake Ellenberger. Now, this is a fight where a lot of people think really Hendricks should have been in the main event slot and fighting GSP for the title. He's not. He's fighting Ellenberger instead, and it's a very tough fight. I opened the line, -170 for Hendricks, comeback +140 in Ellenberger. Both of our guests, once again, laid the juice, came in on Johny Hendricks. So I'm going to have to adjust the line. It's going to hit the books at 2-1, -200. The comeback is going to be +150 on Ellenberger now. Give me your quick thoughts.
They're really similar fighters. And, you know, Ellenberger's wrestling isn't talked about all that much, especially when compared to Hendricks, but it may be a good matchup, especially in the first round. First round, I think it's anybody's game. The longer the fight goes, I think Hendricks has the edge.
Yeah, I do agree with a lot of what you got to say. I think they do match up really relatively well together. And it all depends. If Ellenberger's cardio has improved, like we did see a little bit in his last fight against Jay Heron, if he's able to go 3 strong, it's going to be a fight. I do think that Hendricks also has a tendency to fade a little bit as well. Both of them got tremendous knockout power. Both of them have that wrestling, obviously. And on paper, Johny Hendricks should have the edge, but I think you're right. It might be a little bit closer than people think. Jake Ellenberger has decent takedown defense, as does Hendricks, but they could probably both get each other down depending on the right position, the right technique if anybody makes a mistake. So both of them got knockout power, both of them have the wrestling. It's an interesting fight. Slight edge, Johny Hendricks. As far as the bet goes, for me, I wouldn't lay the juice on Johny Hendricks. I think this could be one of those spots that we're all surprised by Ellenberger maybe coming through in this fight too. So this is, as of right now, it's more of a pass, or I'm leaning towards Ellenberger a little bit more as well based on the line, but we'll see what the public does with it. But it is going to hit the books at -200 for Johny Hendricks.
Well, that's it for another episode of MMA Odds Breakers. You can look for the odds that Nick cracked right here on the show to start popping up at the sport books throughout the coming week. As always, thanks to our two special guests, Adam Martin and Nick Vlass, bringing great information. And thanks to all our followers out there. We've had a great year. Happy holidays.
And for more UFC 155 previews, information, picks, and much more, make sure you go to MMAOddsbreaker.com and also follow us on Twitter at MMAOddsbreaker. For Miguel Iturrate, I'm Nick Kalikas saying until next time, enjoy the fights. We'll see you next year.